Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragons Collective. This is the fortnightly D&D RPG variety show where a bunch of creators get together to talk and discuss a range of RPG topics. The main theme for today's show is tips for DMs. Maybe you're just starting out, maybe there's always more to learn. Well, let's find out and roll some creator clips.
Hey everyone, my name is Flutes. My wife is Opal and we run the Flutes Loot YouTube channel and flutesloot.com. This is my first time participating in this D&D variety show and I'm happy to be here. I want to share how I got into DMing and maybe that can give some tips to some of you that are thinking about DMing and how you can ease into that. So the way I started out DMing was after my first campaign wrapped up, I said, okay, I think I want to try DMing. I think I could do it, but it was intimidating because it's like there's a lot to juggle that as a player I didn't need to worry about. So I asked my brother-in-law, I said, hey, I want to do just like a one-on-one session. I know that you're hungry to play more D&D. I want to learn to DM. If I'm a DM, then we can play more because then we have more DMs around. So how about I just run a quick one-shot adventure. You make like a 10th level character of your choice and I'll just run you through like kind of like a grid exploration and you'll try to find some kids that some witch in the woods took away. And when you die, and if you win, you win. And then I'll learn a lot from the experience. So I just planned out a bunch of fun little encounters using some of the monsters in the manual, particularly some beasts. He ended up getting killed with a combination of a giant ape, which I learned was a very effective monster, and I would describe what happens when he goes through that mountain pass that I have in that part of the grid. So I have like practice with describing areas and exploration. I have encounters there of different monsters or people to interact with. Some people might want to steal from him. Some monsters might be hostile. Some monsters might be easy to get by with a good animal handling check. And just try to diversify the things that I was applying so I could get practice in all the different aspects of the game. So exploration, role-playing, and combat, I could do all of them. I highly recommend doing this as just a quick, like 1 hour bit of fun with a friend to try to get your feet wet with DMing. You'll get over some of the butterflies in your stomach and you'll get a feel for what's easy and what's not so easy, and you'll learn what kind of note-taking helps you. It's an excellent way to get started and I highly recommend it. Try doing a bunch of one-shots with your friends. One-shots are a great low-maintenance, low-commitment ask of your friends to just try out your skills and to get some feedback from them. You can observe how they react to different one-shots and all that sort of stuff. One-shots are excellent. So start off with a one-on-one, get your feet wet with a friend, then start doing some one-shots, get really used to it and see what your style is. You'll be a proficient dungeon master in no time. I hope you enjoy the rest of this variety show, assuming I'm not the last one in the order, and that you can learn a lot about getting into DMing. Thanks again for being part of this show, and good luck learning to be a dungeon master.
This is No Fun Alloved's top 5 tips for new DMs. Number 1, collab with your players. You could sit down and have a masterpiece of a game in mind. You sit down, you run it, but guess what? Your players didn't want to play in that game. You want to run a super duper hardcore hex crawler, but your players wanted to play Sunshine and Rainbows. You wanted to run Sunshine and Rainbows, but your players actually wanted to play in a gritty noir style game. Whatever the case may be, you cannot show up to the table with different expectations. You need to talk with everyone and say, hey, we're going to run this kind of game, or do you want to run this kind of game? What kind of game do you want to play in? Whatever the case may be, you have to talk with everyone at the table and make sure that everyone's expectations are on the same level. 2, don't over prep. You are there to run a game, but guess what? You should only focus on the next game that you're running, on that very next session. Do not think about 10 sessions, 20 sessions, 50 sessions from now. It's going to get you absolutely nowhere real quick. Just make sure that the next session that your players show up to is well thought out. Yeah, of course, you can prep enough, and if they go in different directions, then you are always prepared. But do not think about the extreme long term, because your players are going to be doing all sorts of crazy things, and you're just going to stretch yourself way too thin, prepping way too much. Number 3, don't get hung up on the rules. You as a DM should probably know a solid 70, maybe 80% of the rules of your game system, but at the end of the day, there's always obscure random rules that you're just never going to know. When it comes to those things, if they come up, have a quick ruling on the fly and get the game rolling. You know what ruins a game? When you take 5, 10, 15 minutes out of the game to sit there and pour through all the books, looking at an obscure rule, and then having to look online to see how people rule it. Just roll with it. It doesn't matter if it's wrong at that time. So long as you keep the game at a steady pace, you're going to have an excellent time. And then, of course, later on you can say, oh yeah, it was different because of da-da-da. But now from here on out, we're always going to rule it this one way. 4, make your life easy. Make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, have things prepared. Whether that be a cheat sheet for all of those basic rules, or a dice macro for all those dice that you're rolling, or just simple little initiative coins and tokens, have something there. Have tools ready to make your life easy, to make running the game simple, and to make sure that you're not wasting any needless time doing the same monotonous things. And 5, roll with the punches. Your players are going to ruin everything, and guess what? That's a-okay. That's what we signed up for. Just make sure that when you're running the game, allow there to be that crazy chaotic freedom, allow your players to get away with a bunch of crazy things, and just ensure that everyone is having a great time at the table.
Hey, I'm Bert Christensen over from Goblin Goblins. Today I got 2 DM tips for you, and if you want more, check out my channel, Goblin Goblins. The first one is, this is a cooperative game, so play together. As a DM, it can be really easy to kind of think of this as DM versus players, but stop that. This is a cooperative game. Play together. And how you can reduce this tension between the DM and the players is when your players succeed, celebrate with them, and when they fail, mourn with them. The second tip is plan a consistent day and time that you're playing. And if you have a very busy group, then meet every other week. It's going to allow people to be more consistent in their time getting together. And if not people are there able to make it for a night, then go ahead and still meet, but watch a movie, watch some shows, play a different game, still work on building that community, because D&D is more than just playing a game. It's this community, these friendships that you're building together. So if not people can make it, still gather, still do something fun, and if not people can make it, then sweet, you get to play D&D. Again, if you want more DM tips, then check out my channel, Goblin Goblins. I'll see you there.
Hi everyone, it's Clara and I'm back, and I'm going to do a similar sort of video to last time where I go through quickly how I paint up a miniature whilst talking about today's theme, which is DM tips. I will say that there's a fuller version of this up on my channel, including the paints I use, and today it's a wood elf from Atlantis Minis. These are absolutely glorious figures. I've not long finished painting them. I don't just buy Games Workshop, but what I will also say is that I'm going to be doing some scratch build of enemies in the next video as well, so not just things that you have to buy. So let's go down to the table, shall we? So when I first started DMing, I started by running a one-shot because I wanted to see how well I could cope with preparing, and I was glad that I did that. I thought it was a good way to figure out my DM style and whether I could do it. And with that, with the one-shot, I was well prepared and everything, and I really enjoyed it. One thing that I did get wrong was that I killed off a character completely within sort of half an hour. I didn't realise I just didn't clock how much damage I was doing to that character. Now, luckily, they were a very experienced player, so it was okay. But for a newer player, that might have really put them off, and that was bad DMing. It was quite a big table as well that I was DMing for, and when I started running a campaign, I reduced the numbers. Now, when I did start running a campaign, there was a couple of things that I started doing early on that maybe, we could learn from. So one thing was that I had most of my players and myself all like the RP side, the adventure, but there was one of my players really likes the battles. They wanted to fight. Now, neither way is right or wrong, but they were getting quite frustrated because we were doing more of the RP and the story, and to be honest, we should have had that discussion at the beginning, and they should have known what they were getting into. Another thing was that there was with the same player, and I feel really bad about this because there is a certain thing which the way rules was written, one thing happened one way, but I as a DM didn't like that, and so I played it a different way. But in hindsight, there was no reason why I couldn't have been more lenient, because I reduced their enjoyment, and so to be honest, I should have been better on that, and I should have changed my views. So there's some tips from my mistakes. I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully you enjoyed looking at the miniature that I painted as well. Like I say, there's a full-length video tutorial on my channel, and like I say, next time I'm going to be building a monster from scratch, so I'll show you how to do that. But it was really nice to be able to share some of my DMing mistakes. So till next time, take care and bye bye.
So I think Clara sort of hinted in the middle there of what my tip is for a new DM, and that's try a one-shot. You know, you could find you don't really enjoy it. You might find that, okay, I didn't know those bits of the rules very well, maybe I should go and look that up. And, well, these are kind of good starting points potentially for you. It doesn't necessarily need to be, a special edition like this version of Curse of Strahd. But in Curse of Strahd, there is, at the back of the book, basically in the appendix, a one-shot, maybe 1 or 2 sessions. Basically, you run through like a haunted house, basically, with the party. And it will get you the idea as the DM and also get maybe new players up to speed. So there's that sort of option. Before you go into a big branching campaign or storyline, even if it's your own, having that one-shot idea and opportunity allows you and the players to sort of work out how things are going to work. Another option is, in my opinion, the brilliant book, which is Candlekeep Mysteries. Amazing adventures when you're reading through this. Now, why Candlekeep Mysteries and, not the main event of Curse of Strahd or Icewind Dale and stuff like that? Well, with 17 different adventures in this book, they're all pretty much standalone. There is the sort of an overarching idea of Candlekeep itself and taking books to be able to get into Candlekeep and then getting these sort of things. But you could take each of these adventures, take it out of that setting, put it in your own setting, or just ignore, the requirements, the limitations and whatever, and just run the adventure for you and your players as a one-shot to, get your teeth into DMing. I think that's the idea, at least, with me sort of suggesting one-shots, is that you get a chance to sort of experiment. You get a chance to see how everything works from the other side of the screen. Anyway, that's enough of my face. Let's carry on with some more creator clips.
Hello, Collective. It's the Drunken Kobold. Today, we're going to... Dungeon Master's Guide. Yeah, we're going to need this. And... Monster Manual Guide? Okay, I guess we're going to need that too. Thanks, but... ow! I didn't even get my hand on the Player's Handbook Guide? Are you kidding me? Is this ever going to stop? No. No. Make it stop. Make it stop. No. Are you done now? All jokes and bad acting aside, what do you need to start playing Dungeons and Dragons? It can be really overwhelming when you come into a new game and there is a ton of rule books and optional rules. What do I need to get? Do I really need to get all of these books? I was told I only need the core rule books. Is this true? Well, I'm going to help you get all of that figured out, especially if you are a new Dungeon Master to 5e. First, let's start with the Player's Handbook. The Player's Handbook are the fundamental rules of the game that everybody needs to know. As a starting Dungeon Master, you only need to know chapters 7 through 10. All the previous chapters are more for your players to know, and you'll get a grasp on these rules the more you're exposed to them through frequent gameplay. Other than that, you don't need to do anything to start with the Player's Handbook. Let's hop over to the Dungeon Master's Guide. To start, there's actually very little in this book that you need to know. Start with pages 25 through 34 for creating a campaign, as well as chapter 3 for creating an adventure. and boom, you're done. That's all you need to know from this book before we move into our monster manual. The monster manual seems like a very, very intimidating book, but you don't need to know all of it. You don't need to memorize every monster stat block. The only thing you need to know is the introduction on pages 4 through 11. That will teach you everything you need to know about how to use this monster manual so that you can later use any creature or NPC in this book to its fullest potential. Now, I mentioned NPCs. You're going to need these to flesh out your game. We're going to hop back into the Dungeon Master's Guide really quickly, and you're going to read chapter 4. It's a really short chapter spanning pages 89 to 99 called Creating NPCs. You may not have the time to create NPCs though, so you're able to hop into Monster Manual for Appendix B to have a plethora of NPCs to start with. These are really good for your players to interact with and have easy encounters earlier on. Once you're more familiar with Dungeons & Dragons and you may want to delve deeper into more books, Volo's Guide to Monsters is a good place to start. It adds more monsters to your monster manual as well as NPCs with its own Appendix B. Lastly, the last thing you're going to read in the Dungeon Master's Guide is Chapter 5, and you are ready to start your own game of Dungeons & Dragons as a Dungeon Master. Did you like my tips for this? Come and see me at the Drunken Kobold, where I review different D&D products as well as give you tips there on how to use them. In the meantime, cheers and may the rolls be with you.
Hey everyone, Rivers here from Rivers RPG channel, and my tips for a new DM or GMs, I got a couple of them here. First of all, you got to relax. Relax and chill out. Whether if you're a beer drinker, you have a beer. I know a lot of people do that. If you don't, just find a way to chill out, have a tea, or just do a little Zen mojo. Just relax your body and mind, and just remember, you're there to have fun. And that's the second point, is have fun. You're there to have fun along with your players. Your players are there to have fun. You're trying to make it fun for them, but you don't need to force things. Let the dice roll. Let the players do what, not necessarily do what they want, but let them have fun and let them explore. Okay? And you're there to have fun, and the idea is it's just a game. You're there with friends. They're there to have fun. So that's the last thing I have is be ready to improvise, improv, because the players never do what you expect. They will find a way to put a wrinkle in your plans. I plan one session ahead, that's it, and the next session I plan it, and usually by a half hour into it, my plans are going out the window and I'm having to improv stuff because my players do something I didn't expect. Whether it's taking a force cage and bringing it about a black dragon that was in human form and forcing him to stay in the cage and stay out of the fight, basically, and taking away a lot of the big bad's power. So they do things like that, and it's like you have to improvise. So you just roll with the punches, but remember, have fun. That's the biggest thing. I'm Rivers from Rivers RPG. Have a good game.
What is up? I'm Melissa McCack from Room 51, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about some DMing tips for beginners. And specifically, I'll be talking about Dungeons and Dragons, although I guess this could be applied to pretty much any role-playing game, although I haven't played a whole lot of different kinds of role-playing games. But D&D is the one that I've played the most. So that's what I'll be referring to a lot. For what I want to talk about mostly is improvisation in terms of encounters specifically. because there's so many different things. There's so many different tips, and you could look at a bunch of different videos and then look at all these segments on this video alone, and you'll find a lot of things. But one of the things that scared me the most while being a DM for the first time, and even now is kind of daunting to me, is improvising encounters. Because it's one thing to improvise as a character and like come up with some sort of random accent or voice or whatever, but it's another to like completely create an encounter that you were not expecting to happen, that you didn't think that the players would do necessarily. So how do you work with that? And one of the things, I'm gonna have Oliver have a link in the description box below, and I think that this is a great resource. This is written by Chris Perkins. He is probably my favorite dungeon master. I know a lot of people like Matt Mercer and everything, as well as other DMs, but Chris Perkins is my favorite dude to like watch how he DMs and everything. But he created this, I guess, like blog / article piece, and it's pages and pages long on all different kinds of tips that he provides for dungeon masters, and I highly recommend you read it. And in one of those parts, he talks a little bit about improvising encounters, which I think is great. One of the things I would say is know the world that you are playing in, right? So whether you're using an adventure book or you're creating a world on your own for your campaign or for the session, whatever it is, know the world, breathe it, live it, love it, okay? That way, when things happen, you would know what would happen in this situation because you know this world. And then in terms of encounters of like which monsters to place in there and humans and what are their stats going to be, Chris Perkins has a whole little excerpt in there in the link below in the description that shows how he kind of like converts stats for different monsters and things to level them up or down or whatever. And I think, now it's based in 4th edition, so there's that, but I'm sure that you could easily figure out how you would do it for like 5th edition or whatever edition you are playing. So that is my biggest tip, is know the world that you're in and really understand the world that you're playing in, and have this handy dandy little reference sheet on how to quickly create monsters and NPC characters and everything and their stats really quickly. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Have a good one.
Hello, my friends. I am Bill Allan, and here are some tips for new DMs.
I know more than you.
To start off with, I want to remind everyone that role-playing games are games. That means they're meant to be fun. Should they be challenging? Yes, of course. Should you know the rules when you're playing any game, like even a Monopoly or sports? Yes, of course. But to start off running, you don't have to know every single rule. That is a myth, and it's a myth that I and other people have dispelled before. If you have the player's handbook and you know how to adjudicate basic combat and skill checks and knowledge checks, then you're pretty much okay. On the topic of knowing things, spells are a huge part of the game. If you play a divine or arcane spellcaster, it is actually the player's job to know the spells. So as the DM, a starting DM doesn't have to know how every spell works. That would be insane. Remember, new DMs, that the game is not adversarial. It's not about you defeating the party or them defeating you. It's about you creating a world that's alive with lots of different adventure options, but then listening to what the players want to do and improvising and reacting to create obstacles and challenges and ultimately rewards that will engage them in your game. The balance between preparation and improvisation is huge. A lot of new DMs spend a ton of time preparing an adventure only to have their party decide not to go on that adventure path when you actually go into it. You want to prepare kind of an idea of what's going on in a region wherever your adventure is taking place, and sort of have the outline of multiple different kind of options for adventures open. And then you kind of plant these seeds in your narrative, in your storytelling, and you let the players decide which way they want to go. So I don't advise prepping a massive campaign. I prep one bit at a time, and I mostly respond to the players and what they want to do. The last big tip I wanted to share here is that pacing is everything. When you're running a game, try to keep the pace going. And that doesn't always mean non-stop combat, but it should mean that your story continues, that you have sort of regular opportunities for the players to engage in their characters' specialties, whether those are like knowledges or skills, spells, abilities, features of their background or their class. You want to kind of give everybody an opportunity to be in the spotlight. So pacing and kind of keeping the flow of your game going is really important. Well, those are just the short tips, guys, but if you want any more knowledge and lore to beef up your DMing and GMing skills, check out my channel. I have a whole playlist called Table Topics that are tips for both DMs and players. See you around.
Before we jump into the news, well, here's a quick Kickstarter video from the Dungeon Coach.
Time out. Here's an expansion to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm the Dungeon Coach, and this is Alkender's Almanac of all things. It's a modular rules expansion for combat, exploration, and social encounters that truly lets you customize your game experience. There might be rules in D&D that you feel are missing a little something. You want more tactical combat options, new actions for martial classes, make the game more challenging with adding extra death rules, lingering injuries, and resurrection systems. There's also new exploration systems like travel, downtime, rest, random encounters that are all fully customizable. There's also a lot for social encounters, not just between players and NPCs, but between everybody at the table to get everybody talking and roleplay together. It even has rule systems that aren't currently in 5th edition, like crafting systems, new weapon and armor systems, how to run skill challenges, and mass combat. Alkender's Almanac has all of these things, because every table is different and we all don't want the same game experience. So I'm giving you plenty of options to find the right fit for how you want to play. So check out the link down in the description or go to thedungeoncoach.com and get in on the action. So let's go.
What can you expect to see from Don't Be Bored over the next week or so? Well, there'll be a review, a very short, maybe negative review of the board game Lost Explorers. There's also going to be a build of the month with Warlock tiles, if that's not already out. That was really fun to build. And a couple of reviews on some of the WizKids Warlock tiles sets / accessory packs. WizKids has confirmed they are going to be releasing two additional Curse of Strahd boxes of miniatures. Now, I got the previous two, and they were pretty cool. They brought some of the characters from the artwork of the book actually out and onto the table in 3D pre-painted glory. Really liked those sets, and the fact is that with those, it was a set box or two boxes. You bought that box, you knew what you were getting. And, well, let's be honest, there looks like there's some very interesting characters included in the upcoming sets from the pictures. WizKids has also announced, or it's been seen as a pre-order item, the WizKids Warlock Tiles accessory pack Spelunker's Docks, which that's quite a weird one to say. No pictures have been released of this set yet. It sounds almost released after the Cavern sets and alongside some of the play mats that they're going to be doing. This one in particular seems to really be aligned with a lake map that they've spoken about in the description. Basically, these docks, there's going to be a few different dock bits that can kind of fit together in different configurations. A main bit with 3 small dock bits coming off at least. And then there's some boats and a few bits like that. One of the interesting bits for the boats is that they've got bits that you can, like seats that almost you can take out. It's something like a friction fit, it says. So you can take those out so a bigger miniature will fit on it. I think that's a nice touch because, there's nothing worse than when you're having to try and balance or squeeze a miniature into something that it kind of should be able to fit in. So that's a nice touch. It'd be interesting to see how well this one goes down because the Cavern set that it seems to be almost an accessory to go with, that seems to be getting a bit of a mixed reception at the moment. Until we know more, however, I'm looking forward to it for now. Anyway, that's enough news, not too much this week. Now let's crack on with some more clips.
Hey everybody, Tom here from BuryBoardgames. Let's build your very first D&D character in under 3 minutes. To start adventuring, you're going to need a playable character, a PC. You get to build this being from scratch. There's an example blank template in the back of the player's handbook, or you could download a legit copy of this character sheet for free from dnd.wizards.com. It represents your skills, how good or bad you are at performing certain tasks. Your equipment, your weapons, your money, your armour. It's like a pencil and paper DNA of what makes you, you. The fun part about building a character is you get to fill in this sheet according to whatever fantastical race you want to play as, plus your class, plus your background. Races, you say? Think Middle-earthy. You could play as a halfling, Frodo, a dwarf, Gimli, an elf, Legolas, a human. You're human, right? You could play as a gnome, like this cheeky chappy. Aww. You could play as a half-elf, a beautiful love child between Aragorn and Arwen. You could play as a half-orc, a beautiful love child between Aragorn and... that guy. Yeah, that's a thing. Whatever race you pick, it's going to come with its own cool traits and abilities that are only applicable to you. Next, your class. This is like your role within the party. Think Fantastical Fellowship meets Ocean's 11. What are you going to bring to the party? A sneaky rogue? A tank-like barbarian? A frail yet spell-casting wizard? Again, these all provide cool abilities specific to that class. You should note your class largely dictates how you fight during combat, so that's something to consider. Last of all, your background. Think of this as who you were before you went on a life of adventuring and mercenary work. Again, you get some cool traits and abilities that further individualise your character. Think more about your background as a way to get to know your character and how to roleplay them, how to get into their medieval shoes, as it were. So if you're building a character for the very first time, I strongly suggest you stick to the races, classes and backgrounds listed in the player's handbook. Believe me, there's a whole range of stuff in here. I think there's something like, 14 races, 12 classes, 13 backgrounds, and I can't do the maths on the spot, but there's a lot of combinations between those, so you're going to be able to create a really cool character using this book. However, let's not mince words. If you're a new player and you're presented with a blank character sheet like this, it's going to be more intimidating than... yeah, him again. So many boxes to fill in. So here's the thing. Creating a new character is a lot of fun once you know what you're doing. Going into it blind on your own for the very first time, it can be a little bit like... So, on the other hand, what you could consider is something like the D&D starter set. This is a self-contained package perfect for entry-level adventurers such as yourselves. And in it, here's the clincher, it comes with 5, I think, pre-generated character sheets. So they're already filled out for you. In theory, you can open it up, hand out the character sheets, and providing you've got a dungeon master who knows how to roll things behind the screen, get playing straight out of the box. And it's worth noting, that's how I learned D&D a few years ago. And after I played and properly caught the D&D bug, I then had the confidence to go out and build my own character for the next campaign. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Hey folks, WallyDM here, and one of the pieces of advice that I like to give new Dungeon Masters involves combat. Now, if you've flipped through the monster manual already, you know there's all kinds of great stuff in here that you would like to run as a Dungeon Master, or perhaps you were a player before and encountered some of these monsters, and now you want to be behind the screen and take these on and present them to your players' characters. But what I highly recommend is you just pick 1 or 2 at a time. As you're preparing for your game, maybe you just pick one monster out of there. Maybe today we learn about the gelatinous cube, or we learn about kobolds or goblins. And once you get that one monster picked out, then study it. Make sure that you know how to run that monster, what it likes as far as attacks are concerned, and some of the things that it does. And that will help you to develop your skills as far as running monsters, because if you throw in like 5 or 6 different monsters, then chances are you're going to forget what some of their abilities are and maybe not run them as well if you just familiarize yourself with 1 or 2. So that is the piece of advice that I have for new Dungeon Masters, and that is to go slow and easy when you're starting to learn how to run combat encounters. Now, if you'd like to see more of my videos, you can find me on YouTube, WallyDM. I have a lot of videos for puzzle and trap encounters. Thanks for watching.
Welcome everyone to a slightly different segment, the Don't Be Bored polls. Ran on Twitter and Discord, I asked which is referenced most at your D&D table. Now, was it A, Game of Thrones, B, Harry Potter, or C, Lord of the Rings? Now, Twitter was 92% saying Lord of the Rings, not many Harry Potter or Game of Thrones fans there. However, over on Discord, a slightly different story, with a troll being in the dungeon of Harry Potter being rather popular. Next up, I asked which D&D book are you most excited for? Is it The Wild Beyond the Witchlight or Strixhaven? Well, Twitter said 75% The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, whereas on Discord 10% said neither of them. Well, there is that third mystery D&D book still coming, I suppose. And finally, on Discord I proposed the situation where you find a very valuable book. Do you A, sell it to the top bidder because gold is king, use it to enter Candlekeep, or would your character not even notice it's important/valuable? Well, it seems most people would use it to enter Candlekeep. Well, it's an amazing adventure book. Future polls are going to be put up on the Don't Be Bored Twitter and also on the Discord channel, both of which are going to be linked in the description box below. So come and say hi on Discord or just answer the polls as they pop up on Twitter. Now, on to the next.
Hello everyone, this is Matt from Day 20 Gaming with some tips for those of you thinking about getting behind the screen and being a Dungeon Master for the first time. Tip 1. Get inspired. Find something that makes you want to DM, and focus on that. It could be a specific adventure, or a campaign setting, or maybe even a movie you think would be good as a D&D story. Whatever gives you a spark, go with that. I think a lot of people go down a rabbit hole of what makes me different, or how can I be unique? This, to me, is just as unhelpful as when folks try too hard to duplicate the experiences of other D&D games they've seen online. Don't chase that rabbit. Don't be so busy trying to be different that you don't let yourself have fun. As Matt Colville says, if you like it, put it in your game. Even if it has nothing to do with, quote, standard D&D fantasy, grab onto that excitement and let it take you somewhere. Tip 2. Start small. Focus on a single dungeon or small quest, just to get comfortable. Rome was not built in a day, and sprawling narratives are not conjured overnight. D&D is just sitting down and telling a shared story with your friends, new and old. So when you're first starting out as a DM, focus on just that, a story. It should have a beginning, middle, and importantly, an end. How long that story takes to tell is entirely up to you and your comfort level. Tip 3. Use what's out there. For anything you're not confident doing yourself, use something off the shelf. One of the biggest advantages of playing 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is the glut of content out there. It's why I switched over from a different system. I was spending so much time homebrewing the other system to have just enough content to run my game that I was getting burnt out way too easily. Tip 4. This one's a bit more specific, but if your players are also new to D&D, do not explain combat rules. Not at the beginning anyway. Your first session should really be a session 0. Talk about the basics of the game, what the story or plot hook will be, and work together to make characters. Walk them through their character sheets and how to roll, but do not, under any circumstances, explain how to play through combat. This might seem odd for a game that heavily emphasizes combat like D&D, but there's 2 reasons I do this. First, combat is complicated. If you start throwing out bonus actions and reactions and attacks of opportunity at folks before they've even rolled a dice, their eyes will glaze over and all they'll hear is the Charlie Brown teacher voice. It's just too much to talk about in the abstract. And secondly, talking about all those rules will get your players into a rules-first mindset. Now that sounds like it might be okay, especially if you're a rules lawyer, but the problem is that now they are more worried about actions than story. Instead of thinking about how their character would respond to a witty joke in the tavern, they are wondering if talking is an action. If you don't explain the limitations that occur in combat, then your players will be focused on the you can do anything mindset that is key to playing D&D. So instead of explaining combat rules at the beginning, wait until after the group rolls initiative for the first time. Now you can teach everything organically, and your players will be hyper-focused on ingesting this material in order to be prepared for the danger at hand. Give them the quick overview. You can do an action, a bonus action, and a move on your turn. And that's it. Let them take it from there, and explain the rules as they come up. I hope that was helpful, and I wish you luck in your future endeavors behind the Dungeon Master screen. If you liked what I had to say and are looking for some of that already existing content to help you with number 3, then follow me on Twitter at Krasiph, or go to my website at www.day20.info.
Greetings and salutations once again. My name is Captain Venom. I'm here to give you some tips about being a DM. Well, first-time DM, long-time DM, any kind of DM. Whether you're new or old, this will be some helpful information regarding the game in general. So, my tip for you for this week, and it's been a while, so I will reintroduce myself. I'm Captain Venom of the Six Striders, one of the DMs of the group and one of the players of the group at the same time. You can find us over at twitch.tv/CaptainVenom15 and over on YouTube at the Six Striders. My tip for you all this week is to make sure you got your notes prepped and handy. This is a good tip for all DMs of any caliber, new or old. Notes will help you dictate what you're going to be doing in the session, or rather what plans you might have for the session in general. Of course, this could be anything from as small as either written notes, battle plans, if you are doing a battle that particular session, or even something else. For example, combat. If you want to have a very good encounter for your players, make sure you double check the players' levels. Find the average of your players' levels. Basically, I believe the average would be taking and adding all of their individual player levels and then dividing that by how many players you actually have. So, for example, if you were running a 3-person campaign, divide that by 3. A 4-person campaign, divide that by 4. And if you're running a 5-person campaign, divide that by 5. And that's the CR rating you want to go for. Or either 1 or 2 above. You don't want a too deadly of an encounter, so you wipe your party. Unless if you're really trying, then go for it. And wipe your party. Do as you please. You're the DM, you make your own rules. And of course, make sure you have everything handy, either with a Dungeons Master Guide, Monster Manual, so on and so forth. Make sure you got everything planned out, and if it's a big bad evil guy, or the big bad evil guy, make sure they're statted properly, especially for the encounter going forward. My name has been Captain Venom. I hope you all have enjoyed my little tips and tricks for new DMs. Thanks so much for listening.
And that about wraps today's show up. I hope you've sort of learnt some great tips for DMing, whether you've been doing it for a long time, or maybe this has just encouraged you to make that jump from one side of the screen to the other. If you do, just remember you're playing with the sort of the party of adventurers, not necessarily against them. Thanks for watching, and thanks to all of the creators that got involved today. All of their information, sort of links to their channels, will be in the description box below, and you'll be missing out if you don't go and see their amazing content. Until then, well, stay subscribed, like, all that jazz, and I'm Oliver East, signing out.